Hello. Welcome back to my channel. I am Monet and you are watching Life is Monet. I have 7 books on my TBR for the month of March, and I only own one of them. And the other ones are literally new releases, with most of them actually coming out in the month of March. So I'm going to be basically in and out of the bookstore or ordering several books from Amazon this month because all of the books that I want to read just came off the press. Kicking off my March TBR is going to be A Clash of Kings. This is book 2 to A Game of Thrones. I read Game of Thrones in February. It was a buddy read with Robin, and I was thoroughly impressed at how much I enjoyed that book. Like, I'm in awe of his writing talent and all the things that he managed to accomplish. It's a rather large book following a rather large central cast of characters, and I think it really helped that I am familiar with the world, that I've watched the shows and I've watched House of Dragon, so it was nothing for me to balance all the different characters. But I just think that I was not aware or prepared for how much HBO actually had to like tone down from the books. I thought that they were kind of like enhancing the story, but man, if you read them and you pick them up, it's almost as if like HBO didn't need to do much because George R.R. Martin gave them everything that they needed. And it honestly makes me more mad about how the show ended, but we'll get into that later. So I read book 1, I loved it, I enjoyed it. I'm actually super excited to go into book 2 because I want to know what's going to happen next. I want to know what's going to be different from the show. Not to mention the fact that the further along I get in the series, the closer I am to my rewatch of the show. But I almost feel like it's not even necessary with how much I am enjoying the characters. And honestly, like, some of those castings were like spot on because they did a really good job. They did justification to the characters that were in the story. The next book that I'm going to be reading is Sunbringer. This is the sequel to God Killer. We're following Kissen and Anara, and there's a third character which I can't remember his name, but we have a God Killer, and this is world surrounded by God. So we have a God Killer, and then we have a little girl named Anara who is actually a noble child that Kissen is taking care of, and she's been charged to take her to a god, or take her to this like broken city to figure out how to separate Anara from this like little god that she's formed a connection with. And then we also have a knight in the story that's kind of like sworn to the king, and so they're all on these different missions. At the end of book 1, something pretty drastic happens, and I cannot wait to get back into the world. I really enjoyed it. Kissen is such a Witcher-like character, but she's a female. She's also handicapped, and it's so cool to see her balance like dealing with a prosthetic leg, but also just being such a badass like warrior and fighter character within the story. So I know that this was like a indie published book that has now gotten so much like recognition, and now it's going to be traditionally published, but I really hope that we keep a lot of the magic and the things that I loved about book 1 as we go into book 2, and that like all the hype and transitions and publishing drama did not get in the way in the quality of the story. Then I'll be reading Empire of the Damned. I read book 1. I enjoyed it. I didn't think that there was anything original in the story. It just reminded me of every other fantasy book that I had read. Like, it's a conglomerate of like other stories that I love, like An Interview with a Vampire, The Name of the Wind, Between Two Worlds. It's like I could see inspirations and traces from all of those books when I read Empire of the Vampire. And I know that Monty read it. He felt the same way of like, this is giving like everything I've ever read before, but in one book. And so I'm wondering if it's going to keep with that trend, or if we're going to get a little more original with book 2, but it's still like very entertaining. The only complaint that I had about that book is, 1, it felt a lot like a copycat of other stories, and 2, that it was extremely long. Other than that, like, those aren't bad complaints to have. So it was still entertaining. I'm still looking forward to book 2. I know that it's still going to be a long book. I hope that it doesn't get too long, but I'm still not really bothered by the fact that it reminds me of everything I've ever read before. The next book I'll pick up is Where Sleeping Girls Lie. This is the sophomore release to the author who wrote Ace of Spades. We're following a girl that has been homeschooled her entire life, and now she's going to like this uppity boarding school, and the first night that she's there, her roommate actually goes missing. So this kicks off a lot of rumors around the new girl and whether or not she had something to do with the disappearance of her roommate. And it also grabs the attention of the unholy trinity, which is the group of popular girls at this boarding school. And so they invite Sade in, and she kind of becomes one of them. Everything kind of seems to be going okay. Sade is balancing her new experience at the school, her new friendship, but she's also still kind of wondering what happened to her roommate until the body of another student is found, and this causes Sade to really question what's truly happening at the school and what the students at the school is actually involved in. The next book I'm picking up is going to be slightly iffy. This is going to be Fbound. This is a new trilogy series, a new fantasy series by the author who wrote The Final Strife. I read The Final Strife. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it enough to keep going, so I read book 1 and then I stopped. But I'm hoping that this series actually works out just a bit better for me. Of course, from the title, we are in a Fae world. The synopsis of this one says that Yiren is a warrior in the elven army and has known nothing but violence her whole life. Her little sister, Lettel, is trying to make a living as a diviner, seeking prophecies for a better future. When a fatal mistake leads to Yiren's exile from the elven lands, they are both forced into terrifying wilderness beyond their borders. There, they encounter the impossible, the Fae court. The Fae haven't been seen for a millennium. Now Yiren and Lettel are thrust into their seductive world, torn between their loyalty to each other, their elven homeland, and their hearts. So we're gonna have a clash of elven and Fae lore, elven and Fae characters, and I think that's probably what really piqued my interest into this new fantasy series, but I'm hoping that she really does it justice. And in terms of like fantasy characters, like I love Fae, but I really love elves, so I know that we're gonna get cast out of that land, but I hope that we still get to see like a good balance between the elves and the Fae and how they interact and who's more powerful and how their magic kind of works. So I'm hoping for a lot of lore and world building in terms of the story, but also like strong characters. Then I'll be picking up The Tainted Cup. This is book 1 to a new series by Robert Jackson Bennett. You may have known him from writing, what is that series called? Foundry Side, I think it's called. This is the author of City of Stairs and Foundry Side. I read Foundry Side. I did not like it at all. The story was not for me. The magic system was not for me. There was nothing enticing about the story. So I want to see this author in a new element to see if maybe we can figure out, if he can do something that actually works for me this time around. But The Tainted Cup sounds like that's going to be it. This book is kind of supposed to be a fantasy mystery retelling. The synopsis is kind of everywhere, but what I get from it is that in the inner courts of this world, an imperial officer is found dead, and from his body erupts this tree, and everyone is kind of like on high alert. So they call in the best investigator or detective within this realm, and she has been assigned a new sidekick. This sidekick has been altered to have literally the perfect memory for what it sees and hears, and that's perfect for working with the detective Anna because she never leaves her home and she always wears a blindfold. So she is sending him out to gather information about this dead body and the tree that magically erupted from it. And at first he is super perplexed at her and like the way that she operates her investigations, but the more he starts to see her talent, the more he believes that she actually is the best investigator within this world. And as they get closer to figuring out who actually orchestrated this murder, he becomes super nervous about the future of the world and the realm, and also whether or not he can keep his secrets from his boss. It looks to be about 400 pages, which feels like that's healthy. It feels like a healthy amount of pages for a book of this nature. The last book I plan to pick up in March is going to be very much a risky read, and that's going to be Bride by Ellie Hazelwood. I did a vlog last year where I dived into all of Ellie Hazelwood's romances, and I was not impressed. I did not enjoy them at all, and I found it very lackluster. But this time we are kind of in a fantasy world, so I want to see her again in a different element. I'm giving authors that I've read from before and did not like a fair shake this year, and I feel like, that's growth. So from my understanding, we follow a vampire girl. She's like the daughter of like the vampire king in this world, and there's a new alliance that was recently forged between the vampires and the werewolves, and she has been given as an offering in terms of a marriage of convenience to uphold this alliance. And so she's supposed to go and live in the werewolf world with the wolves, and one of the reasons that she actually agrees to do this has nothing to do with satisfying her family or her father, but mostly just for reasons of her own, because she is on a mission to recover something that has been lost. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a romance between him and her, but I'm not exactly sure how that's going to play out, so I don't want to like, you know, be a liar. I'm sure that this book was an anticipated release and like everybody's read it by now and I'm late, so watch a review. But yeah, I'll be reading it and then I'll be back to talk about it at the end of the month. And of course, as I mentioned before in my last TBR, I'm still reading Full Metal Alchemist and I am still reading One Piece, which I'll talk more about in my wrap up if you guys are interested in hearing what I think about One Piece so far. I don't know how many volumes I'm going to get through in the month. It depends on my mood and whether or not I feel like picking it up, but I am nearly halfway through the series, so that must be a sign that I am enjoying it. Anyways, thank you guys for watching my video and I will see you in my next one. Bye!